allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everybody. First item up is to approve the meeting agenda. We have a couple modifications to the agenda. Under business items, we're going to turn that into A, and that'll be the 8th and 9th grade choir trip. Item B will be discuss the budget, and item C will be the subsequent resolution from the budget. Do we have any other additions or subtractions on the agenda? No changes. I'll entertain a motion for the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mike, second by Greg. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Further discussion on the agenda? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same. Agenda's approved. Opportunity for visitors to address the board. Visitors may not discuss or share any private or personal data at a school board meeting. Any student, program, or personnel concerns must first be brought to appropriate building administrator to be resolved. We're going to limit it to 3 minutes if we have a number of people who wish to address the board. So, anybody like to address the board?
Yes, I would.
Yes.
I am Lauren Hock, and I'm the choir teacher here for almost 3 years. I direct 4 choirs, teach 10th through 12th grade students 15-minute lessons almost every week, teach 2 sections of 6th grade classroom music. Pelican Rapids High School music program and fine arts auditorium is a very proud thing that this community, the community must be very proud of both of those things. I must say though, it is very difficult to build strong music and sports programs. They take years to build, and once a program is cut, it is very difficult to build it up again and bring it back. It takes a good 3 to 4 years, and sometimes more, for programs to get strong. Fellow colleagues tell me this, and I personally know it from experience because I've taught at 3 different schools where it took that amount of time to get to build the programs up. I feel it behooves our school to maintain its music and performing arts programs because, like sports, they showcase the talents of our students and they are an indicator of the health of our community. The music and performing arts improve intelligence. They are not the only activities that use 90% of the brain because they require all senses to be used: hearing, eyesight, touch, movement, hearing, and emotion. And I think our community will regret the trickle-down effect on our school and our community if arts programs are cut. And so I urge you to please not make any cuts in the Pelican Rapids music and arts programs.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak?
I guess I would like to speak real quick.
Okay.
I'm Sean Fitzsimmons. I've been Pelican Rapids band director here for since 1995, and I just want to kind of address what's happening here. Is we're right-sizing our district right now, so we can basically offer what we need to offer without going over budget. But I just want to give you a little bit of history of the music program, just so you can kind of know where we were. When I got here in '95, there were 4 full-time teachers. It was a choir person, a band person, and 2 elementary persons. It was Jeff Peter and Carol LaRue, Carol Skalski, if you remember that. And due to the booming choir program at the time, and the band program was really, really small at the time, but starting to get better, after about 2 years, they decided to add a 3/4 time high school choir person, a gal by the name of Renee Hansen. I don't know if you remember her. And we had John DiFiore coming in for band lessons. So Renee was 3/4 time, John was 1/3 time. So basically, in addition to the 4, we had the 3/4 plus 1/3, which equals about 1.1. So we were literally at 5.1 music staff. And through the years, with decrease in enrollment and such, we ended up losing those 2 high school teachers, right? So we were down to basically the 4. And then we lost the second elementary person. So Jeff Peter was doing everything at the elementary school, K through 6. So basically, we were down to 3. We went from 5.1 down to 3, and with any further cuts, 2.5, 2.0, something has to go. Is it gonna be the entire choir program? Is it gonna be our elementary music? Is it gonna be, you know, how is this gonna work with this? So what I would urge everyone to think about is what other schools are doing that are our size with regards to numbers, and to look at the quality of program too. For example, we played Ada Borup in our sectional basketball game, and their band was 7 through 12, and they had, you know, a good 50 kids. They were a great band, nicest band director in the whole world. But they don't have the numbers that we have, and so we have to think also about, you know, the quality of program and not just the program itself. So it's like, if you want to maintain what we have, if we do any cutting anywhere, it's going to have a trickle-down effect. I know that Perham cut their band program in the same situation. They had just few kids going out for band, and they ended up having a rock band. I don't know if you remember seeing those guys and all that. So they've been trying to build that, and it's just been a real struggle. So I just really, like Lori said, it's so difficult to rebuild from scratch. So again, the arts are exemplative of our kids, and they go out and they show the world pretty much what we do at school, and it's an amazing thing. So I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of the statistics behind our. I think we're already right-sized, but I'm sure my 3 minutes are up. But thank you guys. I know this is incredibly hard for everybody to do. I appreciate that. These administrators they're like my brothers and sisters, and the kids are like my own. And I just it's so painful to watch this. I can hardly even sleep. I got a cold sore, struggling. But anyway, yeah. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Anybody else? All right, we'll move on. Business items, choir trip.
Mr. Ford.
Looking at, it wasn't on the trip list in the fall, so we just wanted to bring it to your attention that 8th and 9th grade Duluth choir trip would be on Wednesday, May 8th. It would not be an overnight, it's just to Duluth and back. It's to work with, would have a workshop at the University of Minnesota Duluth, and then do a little sightseeing and then come back. So, we just wanted your approval.
This is funded through the choir program?
Yep, kids would, I think kids are paying about $75.
Covers it all.
Yep.
I make a motion to approve the 9th grade choir trip to Duluth on May 8th.
I'll second.
Motion by Ann, second by Mike. Approve the choir trip to Duluth on May 8th. Any discussion? Discussion? No further discussion. All those in favor of approving the choir trip signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same. Choir trip's approved. Item B, the budget.
So I just want to start the conversation to say, this has been probably the hardest year. Never experienced. This community, this staff, the administration team has been absolutely priceless through the hardest thing we have ever had to do. We are cutting 10% of a budget, and we're cutting the 10% of the budget to be able to maintain Pelican Rapids and to be fiscally responsible to the community in which we serve. We have worked hard for the last 3 months, looking in every single corner that we possibly can to be able to take the burden of those reductions away from our staff and put it on supplies, put it on contracted services, put it on everything but staff. Unfortunately, with the school district budget, over 85% of your budget is personnel. And so with that, there is no way for us to come up with a 10% budget reduction other than to have to look at staff. So with that tonight, we bring forward to you two scenarios. We have scenario 1 and we have scenario 2. The difference between scenario 1 and scenario 2 is a bottom line figure of meeting scenario 1 meets the board parameters that were set for us in January of that $1 million mark. That $1 million mark in our best efforts, in our best predictions, allow us to have to do this once. Scenario 2 puts us at risk, significant risk, of having to go through this process in another year. Scenario 1 keeps within the board parameters of the class size reductions at the elementary level of K2 in the ratio of less than and underneath the 21 number, and then the 3 through 6 with the ratio less than 27, 28. So reducing the 5 elementary teacher still stays within the parameters that the board set on the front end for the administrative team to work on. Scenario 1, however, is outside of board parameters at the high school level because it does cut a program completely. And that was the only way that we were able to come up with the reduction of $1 million. So with that, I look to Mark and Rudy, to the administrative team, if you have any additional comments before we open it for discussion. Mark?
Sure, just real briefly. I'm Mark Maston, I'm the business manager of Fergus Falls. I came out in May to assist the Pelican Rapids School District. I've been through what you've been, or are going through 13 years ago. Fergus Falls schools basically is the same situation, where we weren't paying attention to balancing the budget over time, and the accumulated effect hit us broadside. We actually went bankrupt in Fergus Falls. I'm here to help you through this, and it's tough. I've seen 20, 30 teachers go out the door in 1 year. It's not fun. I sympathize with you, but unfortunately the dollar don't care, and dollar doesn't have any emotion, and so Randy's and the administrative team have made some very difficult decisions, and the biggest decision of all is going to be on the board. I've been prepping the board for months that this is the most important people in the room, and today is the day. So good luck, and I hope this works out for you. I really do.
So do we know if we want a scenario 2, what next year would bring for us, the following budget year as far as reductions? And deficit spending, where does that bring us?
So the question is, if we went with scenario 2 at the $900,000, what does that do to our fund balance, and what does that do to deficit spending? Where does it put us?
I'm gonna speak in round numbers, but if you don't cut the 200,000 and you are 200,000 short of balancing your budget, it means next year you not only cut the 200,000 you didn't, but now you have to make up the 200,000 that you've already spent. So it has this cumulative effect of, you'll be looking at closer to 400,000 right out of the gate. And that doesn't take into account any other right sizing we may have to do or price increases, or declining enrollment, et cetera. That's about as simple as I can say. And it's kind of like the reason you're in the position you're at right now, is that years ago it wasn't dealt with. It's accumulated to this point where it's now $1.1 million. So,
Is there any news with the legislative piece, the 3%, 3 to 2, or?
House is coming out right now with 3 and 2, but then on the other side of it, you've got a whole bunch of reductions, so it would be it's gonna be a shot in the dark.
When is that decision made?
Session closes May 21st, so that's May 21st.
I believe that's the date, yes.
And remember, we built on 2 and 2.
Do we know approximate dollar 1% additional would bring in
We know the approximate dollar amount of 1%.
based on our ADMs?
Isn't it like $100,000?
I would say so. I mean, we're close to a $10 million school.
Somewhere between 75 and 100,000.
I asked Mark and Rudy before the meeting started about other scenarios, because I had noticed that we had a drastic scenario and a really nice scenario, if there was anything in between. Is there any way to discuss now why there's no in between?
From my vantage point, some of these other scenarios that could be created are more a reflection for the high school and elementary principals. And I don't know how these people all affect where kids need to be in the classroom. And so, a mix and match, I just don't know how it would work. And so I'd have to defer to them to see how that would affect their schedule. And I don't know if they know that answer right off the top of their head.
What I'm referring to is, like I said, scenario 1 is very drastic, scenario 2 is very nice. Finance major I am, created a spreadsheet and did 2 scenarios in between. So I was just curious if they would, it seems like if you do, looking at certified staff at the top, if you could scroll all the way up, if you kept 5, but then brought over scenario 2 underneath as one scenario revised. And then scenario 3, if you did 4 and brought in scenario 1 underneath that, if any of that is things to consider.
We can run whatever scenarios you ask us to run.
I already am.
The impact is on what happens.
Right. If they're
And
logical
scheduling.
things that can be done is my main question.
So just for clarity, what I hear you saying is, if we left with scenario 1 on the elementary level with 5 FTE, and then we brought over scenario 2,
Right.
and so we had a reduction, so basically, instead of 525,000, and
It
instead
ends
of,
up being 464,757.
So-
And then the next scenario, if you do 4 and then bring over the 1 half from scenario 1, it ends up being 958,811.
so ultimately.
Or sorry,
yeah.
465,670, yeah. You're still not at 100% at 1 million, but
Right.
they get you closer. But every option is something to look at.
So as far as our non-certified staff, what happens if we end up with a need where we have to add a person? Is that that affect the general fund, or is that through special ed or anything like that, or?
So typically the need in your non-certified would be a special ed position. If you had a one-to-one that came in that we'd have to hire for, or other high needs, staff that would come in. And so you have to remember that your special ed positions are funded. Mark, I'm gonna defer to you or Rudy. Special ed positions are funded 60-40, 70-30, 80-20, depending upon the level of the position, but they're not 100% gen ed. And so that's why with the non-certified staff in those positions, when those are special ed positions, we can't capitalize on 100% of that cost of that position because it's subsidized by special ed funding.
Sorry,
No, you're good. I think I answered it.
we had a little side conversation going here, I'm sorry.
Special ed varies in funding. It's a complicated formula. It's not just cut and dried at a 70-30 or 60-40. It really just depends upon where we are.
And I was just curious, if we built a budget with no wiggle room in it, and then we had something like that, do we have the means to pay for it?
Go in the right, where we're at. Just to reiterate, Finance Department proposed a 1.2 initially to the board to keep us out of the statutory operating debt and going below where we can't make payroll. The administrative team came back and said, we're gonna try for 1 to 1.1. The board approved the 1 to 1.1. I will be very honest, anything less than 1 is going to cause a repeat of what we're experiencing right now. And so, yes, we could run those scenarios. And absolutely, it's at the board's discretion to approve any one of those scenarios. It's just gonna make it harder in the future.
So if we look at scenario 2, we're $119,813 short of that 1 million. But Mark says that would be doubled next year, so roughly 240,000. Which is more doable than $1 million in a year. Are we looking at levies, bonds? I'm sorry, my terminology is horrible, I don't know the
Levy,
correct one.
yes.
Are we looking at it? Is that doable to get that difference in a levy?
Well, that's a question that you're then putting in the hands of the voters. So,
Well, yeah, obviously.
obviously, so, can you do it? Yes. The timing for that would be starting shortly. The effect of that would be for next year, of course, and would come in handy, but it's not a guarantee.
Right.
And the dollars don't come in next year, the dollars are a year out.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, 2021.
2021 or 2020?
2021.
2021.
We've been saying for a couple of years that there might be an operating levy that has to be on the horizon. We have a choice at this point.
I think we have to try. Whether we have to have it or not right now, we need to try.
I think it's important to get the public educated about it, why we're going for it. I mean, like, you talk to people, and I've noticed that everybody comes to me and it's like, how can you be that much in the hole? And it's like, okay, so this many years ago, we were spending this much money. Okay, so we're still spending this much money, but funding is all changed, that's all changed. Or how many kids have we lost in the last few years? People don't see that. People need to be educated, and we're one of the few schools, I think, in the state that doesn't have a levy right now.
We have to vote, or we have to board approve that. I think something that we took the administrative cuts off the table this year. as far as, if we call it right sizing or admin, but I think that's something that,
Next year it's on the table.
On a practical level, just on a day-to-day level basis, if we're looking at scenario one, you know, if you're just looking strictly at the numbers here, we have 5 full-time elementary teachers. And you say that would, to what extent does that increase the teacher to pupil ratio?
Class size, and I'll defer to Ed, but class size K2 is still under.
K2 is about 20.66.
And then 3.6 would be,
About 23. And that's what, those 5 teachers that would look at probably 2 combo classes. Possibly 4 combo and 5, 6 combo.
So hopefully you're still maintaining under 25 for class size.
Yes.
K through 6. I know that was kind of discussed right away, back in February. Keep it under 25.
Is the 25, is that kind of just the generally known threshold that schools keep in mind based on data or statistics?
Back in my school days, 25 was not rare. 24, and I had one of the larger graduating classes in the early 2000s.
Our demographics have changed a lot though.
Right.
And
But at
especially
that
with
point,
with our neighboring schools.
right,
I mean, I know Fergus, Mark had made the comment that 25, that would be great
yeah.
if you're in Fergus Falls, but we're Pelican Rapids. We're competing with Rothsay, we're competing with Perham. You know, you're talking 14 to 17 kids a class.
I'm just saying it's doable.
Yeah.
It's not unheard of.
Yeah, I'm not arguing, but I'm just saying
Yeah.
that, you know, where we are locally, I mean, I don't think we wanna get our classes any bigger than that,
No.
for sure, because you're competing with towns that
Personally,
they'll come and pick you up right at your door and
Personally,
take you to a
if my
school
kid
that
had-
14 kids.
25 or under, I'd be fine, but I also grew up with that. I'm not a person who's gonna say I want 12 in class.
So how do line items 2 through 5, would be the food and consumer science, or family and consumer science, choir, Spanish, and Phi Ed under scenario 1? What would the ultimate impact then be on options available to the students as a result of those cuts?
I'll defer to Mr. Corbin.
The limit,
What's that?
cutting electives will reduce the options for kids to take.
Right,
So,
to what degree though? I mean, as far as, does that mean,
well, let's say
FACS.
if we go to a part-time Spanish, then kids are gonna have to choose, do you want Spanish or do you wanna take band? You know, they're gonna have to choose Spanish or like accounting or something like that.
versus now they could,
They can
Like
make it possibly work, yeah.
So that's just the older grades, like right now, like FACS is for all 7th graders, that wouldn't be being cut.
9 through 12 electives for
Okay.
FACS, and then 7th and 8th grade rotate quarterly by
Yeah.
quarter.
Yeah, but that would stay the same for 7th and 8th grade? They'd still get that?
If we would go to,
Scenario 1, no.
if it's, I'm going scenario 2, I'm thinking you're saying part-time, then we would look at offering for 9 through 12, if it was part-time.
so with that scenario, Brian, if we're just focusing on the Spanish position in scenario 1, that would be kind of the practical result is kids no longer would have the option to be in Spanish and band.
Well, it'd be certain classes like that, I don't know for sure, because we would have to rearrange the schedule to see what we would, that's, if you would reduce Spanish to part-time, then we have to sit down and look at the schedule to see how we can make it work so kids can take as many classes as they possibly can, but it's going to limit. Because you're gonna have them either in the morning, Spanish, or afternoon, or kind of that midday, and they're gonna have to somehow choose. I don't see how they're gonna be able to have the schedule they have now.
So scenario 1 would result in a half-time.
Scenario
position.
1,
Yeah.
for Spanish,
Right?
Both
Both.
actually.
Or, okay. And then with regard to fax and choir, what's the result is, and I know Lori and Sean spoke to the music and arts component here. I appreciated that. But does scenario one contemplate then choir being terminated?
If we would cut one full-time choir, then we would have to sit down, Dr. Ed and I would have to sit down and discuss scheduling in both buildings to see what we could offer. We still wanna offer something in the high school for students to take for choir.
Well, I mean, it's probably a loaded question, but I mean, what kind of process do you go through to kind of determine that? I mean, does that mean it might not be every grade in the high school that would be able to
We'd combine grades,
combine grades?
we'd look at that, yeah.
So every student in the school district still would have an opportunity to be in choir?
With reducing one, I don't know that answer. That would be very difficult.
Then you're sharing choir amongst elementary school.
And right now, junior high is choir mandatory, correct?
We recommend as every seventh and eighth grader should band or choir.
And then the same kind of question on the 1.0 for facts. What's the impact on the kids? I mean, I get generally what that does, but does that mean no opportunity for facts is available any longer for students at the high school? And then what is the result of the .61 Phi-Ed? How does that impact?
An increase, we'd have one teacher for all PE for each period, each hour. So we'd have one Phi-Ed teacher in charge of all seventh graders, all eighth graders, all freshmen, all sophomores.
Is that only the high school level, or does that also affect elementary level?
That would be the high school.
Okay.
How many total non-certified staff does the district employ? We have that? I don't know what sort of, when I see 2.7 positions for non-certified and 4.2 for high school, I'm just wondering what percentage of non-certified staff does that represent? Is that 10% of 5%? I don't know what the total number of non-certified staff is. Anybody have just a general idea?
We're working on it.
We might have a.
We're working
Hold
on
on.
What does the 1.0 technology non-certified staff, what will that do to the high school level?
So we have, had a conversations with the contracted services that we have through Lakes Country, and, we believe that we can absorb it inside of the contract that we have.
So it's not necessarily us losing a member, it's more of us contracting that member out.
It is, so we as a district have a 1.0 that is a district employee for technology. The rest of the employees that serve Pelican Rapids are through Lakes Country. And so what it's doing is reducing our district employee.
Would we gain them through the contracted service?
No.
Okay, total licensed instructional staff, or do you want professional staff?
Whatever is contemplated under non-certified staff. I guess I don't know the
Or are
answer.
you looking for licensed or not certified? No.
Do you have numbers in front of you, John?
Alls I have is licensed staff numbers. And how many we have in the district. They don't have unlicensed numbers.
The non-certified staff positions for elementary and high school in scenario, well, both scenarios. Are those all paraprofessionals?
It's primarily paraprofessional.
Are they all, would there be any other non-certified staff other than those represented under the non-certified staff category?
I can't speak for the high school, but within our, within what we're looking at the elementary, and part of it is, keep in mind, most of our paraprofessionals are paid either through as special ed, they're special ed paraprofessionals, ELL paraprofessionals, as well as our media center and our secretaries. So, yes. We did some moving around within the budget on a couple of those positions as well.
Do we have to make a decision tonight?
To be courtesy of our staff, so that we can take action on the individual members that are impacted on the positions. The timeline that we set forth in January was to bring staff to the board on the 15th. And so, to answer your question, do you have to? No, you don't have to. You have by state statute until July 1st. My recommendation would be that you take action on the positions tonight, so that then we can move into the individuals that are impacted by the position, and we can take action on the April 15th meeting to be honoring staff so that they have an opportunity to look for positions elsewhere. Otherwise, we're holding them on to possible hope. And they'll lose the positions that are the best positions that are out there, because those are all getting posted right now.
Did you get the feel, as any member of the administration received feedback on that issue? For example, you know what, we get the inconvenience that causes as a result of delaying the decision, but if it leads to a more thorough and more complete decision with real confidence, that would be outweighed by any sort of inconvenience, practical. I get that whole idea. I mean, as a courtesy for anybody in that situation, I'm not discrediting that at all. But I'm just curious whether or not there's been a kind of a gut feeling at all, or if there's been specific staff members that have ever indicated that, you know what, let's kind of keep looking at this, even if it's another 2 weeks, in an effort just to be a bit more assured with regard to the final decision being made. Has there been any representations made to the administration to that effect at all?
We're facing a timeline with the licensed positions, correct? If it's a ULA
June 30th.
situation, June 30th.
They just have to be notified.
April.
April 1st. Was it?
Our contract reads a little bit differently. And I don't have it in front of me, but June 30th is the drop dead piece they have to be, so you have to have backup from there. You do have flexibility tonight to put any scenario on the table that you choose to. The question that really is before the board is, do you want to meet that $1 million target? Or are you comfortable going below that $1 million target? And then anything different than scenario one just puts you below that $1 million target. If you're talking about the scenario where you run with 5 at the elementary level and 4, and the scenario 2 at the secondary level, Brittany's ran the numbers. We're not gonna come up with anything different than those numbers. You're talking about a savings of a 1.0, so if I round that, instead of the instead of the 898, you're gonna be roughly at around 950 if you run that scenario. That scenario gives the high school a little bit more flexibility in its programming. If you start to mix and match any of those scenarios, again, it continues to drop that target. And I'll just reiterate that we're gonna be back at the table. Again, yes, we can go out for a levy, absolutely we can go out for a levy. Going out for a levy is going to take every single soul body in this community hitting the ground, and we still don't know that it'll pass. We know that it took 4, I wasn't here, but 4 rounds to get your building bond passed, and
Two.
2 rounds to get your building bond passed.
Operating was 4.
That's right.
4 or 5.
4 on the levy and 2 on the
Yep.
bond.
So we know that this community historically doesn't support it. And what I want to try to do, and what you hired me to try to do, is to keep this district fiscally sound. And that's what's sitting at the table today for you guys to make that decision, is how do we maintain Pelican Rapids School District?
I think our community's been supportive of the right plan.
Presented the best.
Sometimes finding that right plan.
Takes a couple tries.
One thing that I have, looking at all of this, I know we've talked 1 to 1.2, I know that has been drilled into us. However, when you guys have sat down with the numbers have fluctuated. I personally have started to feel more at ease going under the 1, knowing that next year the dollars can also change. They could change in our favor. They could not change in our favor. I don't want to have to make cuts again next year, however, looking at 220,000, 240,000 doesn't scare me nearly as much as this does.
My only statement to that is that we will be at bare bones when we make the reductions that we do this year. That $200,000 will be hard to come up with. And I hear what you, right, I mean, but yeah, so that's my only piece, is that, any type of reduction is difficult inside of a school system, whether you're talking about $1 or $10 or $1 million, because it's personal.
Can we talk about the proposed buyout options, just how that would affect us? Sounds like it.
So, yes, very generically.
Let's talk about
So,
generic, please.
currently in Pelican Rapids School District, we have a severance package. We have a severance package that provides, an opportunity for those teachers who can retire to have, over a course of 2-year period of time, dollars put into a health savings account. One of the pieces that the board has looked at, to help relieve some of the stress on the system, personnel, is to say what would happen if we, had an MOU, a memorandum of understanding with the union, and within a short period of time, offered a additional severance package to that. The package that we've had a conversation about is a, 2-year, an additional 2-year to your health insurance. That package, we have ran multiple scenarios with, and I'm gonna turn it over to Mark and Rudy to talk about what that looks like.
In most cases, these kinds of buyouts really just don't pay off. There are so many different variables that are involved. One of which is, of course, the teacher themselves really cannot survive on just health insurance alone. When they're retired, they need an additional source of income, and typically that is TRA. And so generally, teachers don't ask for this benefit until they've already made the commitment that they're going to retire. The other piece that comes into play here is who's going to replace that teacher. Everybody makes the assumption initially, of course, that it's a beginning teacher, BA, 0, etc. But of course, when it comes time to hire, you want to take the best available candidate, and that candidate may be a master's degree in step 5. And suddenly now you've chewed up some of those savings, a significant part of it. Another piece that comes into play is how the money is delivered. In some cases, I understand you're using health insurance, but in some cases that money can become taxable if there's other factors on it. And in that point in time, the teacher then is looking at ways to shelter that, and it just becomes more complex. I'm not saying it's impossible, it just becomes more complex. But the biggest thing that you have right now in your contract is you have also a clause that says that these teachers have to inform you by May 30th. And at that point in time, they have to make the decision of whether they're going to retire for the next year or not. If you are going to offer a plan like that, I would recommend that you wait until May 31st and find out if they are going to retire or not, and then discuss the issue. Up until that point in time, it really behooves us to try to make an incentive for them to leave unless we know for sure that they are going to leave. And so that date kind of forces the issue. So in my experience, again, short and sweet is these deals rarely pay off. And it's better for the school district to simply wait for the teacher to make their decision.
Brian and both Ed. I'm just looking at a halftime Spanish, halftime choir, or one time. Are these positions difficult to fill on a halftime position? There's no easy jigsawing with this or putting a crossword puzzle.
Does this take out some of those electives like Spanish 3, 4, all of those higher level options for the high schoolers?
If we would have a part-time Spanish, we'd have to look at eliminating some of those options, yes. More Spanish 1, Spanish 2. Looking at class size might be able to squeeze in Spanish 3.
And same with choir, does that eliminate some of the lessons and things that?
Correct.
Ideally, we need to fill in the resolution piece, and I have it here, so you guys can kind of move through it, and this gives you the flexibility to mix and match as you see fit, and then what you want, I've left it blank, so we can just put in those numbers as to where you are and what you'd like to move forward with on.
Greg, are you thinking we should wait this or what are you thinking?
My preference would be, but that might be a bit naive, and if there are some real practical issues with delaying the decision and the impact it has on the affected staff, I I don't know the extent of that concern. And that's why I was wondering if there was just a general feeling from the staff of the district as to their thoughts on that kind of more practical component of this, which is certainly difficult.
You know, I've had some feedback, I think it is a courtesy to the staff to know sooner than later because the jobs are out there right now. It's a hard decision about it when we make it, but this really gives them the opportunity to give them the best shot they can for their next move.
Brian, you feel to the best of your ability and your knowledge that this is your best scenario that you can bring to the table for in regards to
That amount of money?
keeping what we can and dollar wise, everything like that?
Yes.
Okay. And I,
My thought
Ed walked
is
out.
staff see that potentially they're on the list. Waiting 2 weeks, they still can go and apply, knowing that possibly it might change, but yet they know they're on the list.
I guess one reason why I asked Brian is if we gave him 2 more weeks to dig more, it might be a waste of his time if he feels to the best of his ability that this is all he's got.
If you're gonna change the dollar amount,
Right.
then I would sit down and,
And I guess too, I know teachers have all been asked, I'm sure, but just like, you know, even if everybody could just go back and look at everything like one more time, I mean, $2,000 here, $2,000 here, it all adds up to the bottom line. I mean, if there's anything else that we can, you know, I would just like to, you know, if we can ask of that, I don't know if we can, but just any ideas and anything that anybody else can bring to the table of a few dollars here and a few dollars there, and I know those guys have worked tirelessly, and, you know, I thank them for all the work that they've done, researching everything, but if there's anything that we've overlooked, or, you know, a place that maybe isn't one of the focal points, but we could still cut something or reduce something there, it all would help.
Brenda, I'll just speak to that. The administrative team has worked tirelessly since the January 7th board meeting, when the board passed the resolution and directed the administrative team to look at what possible programs and reductions have been. We've gone line by line, by line, by line item in every single one of the budgets, and truly believe that we have, to our best of ability, looked at every possible corner, every piece underneath the carpet, to be able to bring to you the $1 million or the $900,000. If the board directs us to go back and look again, we will, but I can't express the, how amazed I have been in all of the administration across the system, in all of our departments, because every single department that manages a budget has taken a look at their budget and brought items to the table for reduction. So if directed, we can go back and take a look again, and we might find $1,000, we might find $50. But we're not, I mean, we just found, you know, looking again, because we came up short on our staffing piece, we went through and reduced our, service contracts, or, another $35,000 to help save and offset the cost to make a reduction in the staff. We are at bare bones in our supplies and our extras. That being said, if the board directs us, we'll gladly go back and take another look.
That's actually not a bad idea.
I said, can you just have a bake sale?
You know, looking at creative, earn some money, things in our district is something that I think that, you know, obviously would be of interest.
I just got we're looking at the 21st Century Grant. Just got an opportunity for a Bush Foundation grant that came in the mail to email today, we'll continue to look at grant dollars, but grant dollars are not sustainable dollars, they're dollars that light your system for a period of time and then fade away. But there are a lot of resources out there that we need to try to capitalize on, absolutely. And I push those out every time they come across to the administrative team for whether or not they fit our district and would meet a need. So we continue to do that daily. And check the MDE website for grants and what's out there federally. You know, the nice piece is that our population does qualify us for grants, where some of your other districts don't qualify.
It is probably good to take a look at our whole system as a whole, the right sizing mindset. Because we have lost students for the last several years. I think it's real tricky too when you only have one staff in a certain area, trying to offer opportunities that they can easily get in another school district.
You know, any sort of sense I'm giving, you know, just, a sense of kind of thoughts with regard to holding off on the decision, it has, you know, nothing to do with the work that's been done by administration. I'm probably just thinking of it more of a selfish manner from a board member's perspective, because, you know, these meetings, help me with regard to framing some of the repercussions of the cuts. As Principal Korf had mentioned, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, Brian, but you know, there's certainly nothing that prohibits staff from applying for other positions regardless of the situation. And I get that if they know specifically that they are not going to be retained, that it paints a clearer picture for them. I personally would just, I would be more comfortable with postponing the decision until the next board meeting. Not so much for the administration to go back to the drawing board, because I mean, that's what your position is, that's the rule, and the board relies upon that administrative team. It's more so from a selfish board member's perspective on just taking into consideration the discussion here tonight. So I'll move to postpone the action signing a resolution of any sort with regard to the reductions in programs and positions to the next scheduled regular board meeting.
So we have a motion, do we have a second? Do we have a second? We have a second. This motion fails. What direction do we want to go?
I'm personally leaning towards scenario 2, and I know we're gonna have to fix things next year.
Same. I'm hoping someone wins the lottery and donates it.
Could happen.
Anything is possible.
So by going that route, Mr. Maston, scenario 2, that's $898,448. That's $200,000 short of the 1.2 in question. What you were saying earlier though, you don't look at just the 200,000, because you incur that plus it basically doubles as time proceeds, right?
Yeah.
So So then the district at this time next year, without any sort of operating levy in place, would be at a minimum 400.
I'd like to just,
Is
since
that
I am a
correct?
numbers person, if you want actual,
Sure.
the difference is 119,813 from scenario 1 and 2. You double that, next year it's 239,626. So yes, I understand why you're rounding to make it easy, but in this case, it is not 400, it is 239,626.
Yeah, that'd be the difference between the two scenarios.
It is the difference, but we didn't get to $1 million, so then like he said, that's not where you're looking at next year, you need to double that. So
Right.
that 119 doubled
How does that
is
But,
239.
play?
but Brittany, I think he also said that the original plan was 1.2 million,
Well,
so it'd be between 1.2
if you're
and
looking at 1.2.
scenario 2, yeah. So roughly, in that neighborhood, yes, it would double, and yes, you'll be revisiting this, and that will be probably the minimum that you'll be.
And that's 400, I mean, rounding it, that's $400,000.
Correct.
And right now,
Roughly.
I mean, that's 40% of what we're looking at now. I mean, it just seems so significant to me. I mean, it might feel a little better right now, I guess. But I mean, that's $400,000. So we're a year ahead, and we already know we're gonna be in that position, barring any sort of unforeseen, extreme circumstances from a financial perspective. I think that's significant. I just wanted to clarify that, though. Thanks, Mark.
Do we go for, or do we go for scenario 1? Hopefully, we can make adjustments further in the process, where we bring a person or two back, or
Based on.
aim high, and then hopefully we can
Based on
adjust
funding
it.
or whatever.
Or other scenarios that could happen.
So if we're looking at 400,000 next year, let's say that board resolved scenario 2, what, I mean, I can only imagine. I mean, we're talking another,
Talking a minimum of 4 staff.
yeah.
But what if we get the 3% this year? That's 100,000. 75,000 to 100,000. If we get the 3% versus the 2%.
I think the main thing to remember here is that we're projecting, that there's a lot of variables that could change. You could get more kids, you could have fewer kids, you could get more funding, you could get less funding. We don't know all the scenarios that will transpire, and let's face it, if we all could project ahead, we'd all be lottery winners. But we can't, and we can only go by what the trend is. And so, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but yeah, by taking scenario 2, I don't care whether you take scenario 1 or 2, that's your decision. But if you choose scenario 2, you are putting yourself in a position where you're gonna be revisiting this again in large amounts. And that's my advice to you, you need to be informed.
So where would that put us with regard to the threshold necessary to meet that statutory operating debt situation?
You need to be, I think it's 5% in deficit to be in SOD. At the pace you're going right now, if you don't make, if you go scenario 2, you're gonna be very close to 0. So, yeah. Yeah, Ruby pulled it up here at about 165,000 in the bank. So, on a $10 million operation.
And payroll is what, how much is
Monthly
payroll?
basis, close to 600,000.
600,000, so with 175 in the bank, we won't make payroll. We will have to short-term borrow December, January, February at a minimum, which is an increased cost to the district because you don't get money for free.
Mark, have you had any experience with districts and going through statutory operating debt?
Yeah, Fergus Falls.
What, how long, so that's when the Minnesota Department of Education enters into the equation from
Yes.
What sort of
The
perspective?
The initial response from the state of Minnesota is they send up a representative and they talk to the board and they have the board pass a resolution that they're going to do what you're doing tonight basically, is go through the process of making the necessary budget cuts to restore financial stability. If you fail on that resolution, then the state has some power to usurp the board and take over basically the school district. Rarely does that happen, because the Department of Ed does not want to bring somebody in to run the school district. The vast majority of school districts, the school board members respond. And in the case of Fergus Falls, it took us 2 years to get out, and then another 6 years to get back to stability.
So the Fergus Falls School District didn't find itself being hovered by the state of Minnesota with regard to its decision making.
No, but it did change the culture of the school district. The school board completely turned over. In our case, the school board that did come on, other than 2 school board members, they all were very fiscally motivated and took a much more hard line on the numbers. And in our case, for example, I know you're talking 23 in the elementary and class size. We had class sizes of over 30 for a couple of years in order to get back in this year. Now, I don't see that happening here, which is awesome, but that's the lengths that sometimes you have to go when your back is against the wall. And I just want to have Pelican Rapids avoid that whenever possible. So if your decision is to go to scenario 2, just know that next year you're going to be revisiting this. You're going to have the same emotions going through again, and if you're prepared for that, that's your choice.
It seems to me that in scenario 1, we're gonna be revisiting also.
Pretty much. I think this is going to be something that you're going to be revisiting every year, actually, and make sure that you are right-sizing your district every year. But I can tell you that every year hereafter, if you do scenario 1, the effects get smaller and smaller. You're making tweaks to the budget rather than massive change.
It's a structural problem we need to fix.
Correct.
Either bring more revenue in to sustain what we've been used to and enjoyed here.
So is scenario 1.5 something we can brainstorm on the spot?
I think you can brainstorm it on the spot if you choose to.
Ricky's already brainstormed?
What do you want? I can tell you if I got it.
I don't know, you have it in front of you.
I do.
What do we have?
Well, what do you want, 1.5 or 1.6? So, scenario 2 revised is keeping the first line item and just changing the next 2 to half instead of 1. And that scenario brings the grand total to 957,898.
Let me put it up on this.
Yep.
So what are you,
So, the scenario I just
go in
discussed
column
was
G, or is that-
line item 1.
so
Okay,
this is scenario 3?
sure. All you have to do on that one is change the very first 4 to 5.
Okay, let me just grab it.
And then that changes your dollar amount,
Okay.
464,757, yep. So then your other option you can look at, scenario 4. Is instead keep your 4 for line item 1. And your next 2 line items could be the 1.
Okay. And then do this.
Correct. And depending on what route you go for, if you look at
That's not right, you wanted a half-time in
Nope.
there, right? No, you wanted a
Nope.
full-time? Okay.
That was another flip-flop. So yeah, the 465, 670, and if you were to do the grand total, the difference between those two is only $1,000.
Right.
And you can see that scenario 4 is $1,000 more. Interesting.
Oops. Sorry. Let me try that again. Is that right? Can I get the right numbers there, Brittany?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I appreciate you looking at those. You know, it's what I enjoy. If there are any other scenarios, obviously, you can think of them, but just flip-flopping things. So yeah, if you go back up to the top to how the difference is, you actually see that scenario 4 is $1,000 higher than scenario 3. The only question is, can it be done? Are there any limitations or reasons why those scenarios cannot happen?
That's 950, I can't see it, I'm
That's fine.
sorry, is it 958?
For scenario 4?
Just about
What's-
959.
So the one before that's 957?
Yes.
So Mark, I don't mean to keep going back to you on this doubling up kind of factor, but if we proceeded that way, and we're at that 1.2 million deficit as we speak, you double the 242, or you double the 1.2 less than 958, that's $242,000, multiplied by 2 is $484,000. The school district would be at risk of going into statutory operating debt if it is in excess of 5%, right?
Correct.
And that, you know, let's say the budget's $10 million, I mean, is that how you look at the ratio? So all it takes is $500,000 would be 20, or 5% of
Yeah, it's,
$10 million.
yeah, you're gonna be right on that borderline. You know, and all that is subject to how you're doing this year too. I mean,
Provincial technically about $9 million less next year. Cutting the budget.
but the same scenarios take effect, and the numbers may be just growing or shrinking depending on that, but same effect. Anything less than 1.2, you're not keeping your balance, you're starting to chew away more of your fund balance, and you're under risk of going into deficit. Now, in terms of making these switches between elementary and the Quire Facts, I don't know what effect that has, but, you know, on paper here, it looks like a good compromise.
Right. That's why I said, as long as these can be done and can be an option, that's what we would have to know.
And I just wanna speak publicly, Dr. Richardson had a prior commitment, speaking, and so that's why he left. We were hoping we would be.
Is it feasible to do a 4.5 in the elementary for instructors? Is there a need for a halftime based on combining classes or?
A halftime split in an elementary doesn't do you, because you still have half of a classroom that has to be covered at some point in time. I'll just go back to at the elementary level, just to reiterate that, with that 5, your class sizes are still, very good class sizes. That being said, it's not easy, it's not hard, it's not, but they're still
good at 4 too.
nice. Well, they're better at 4, absolutely, but just as you look at the pieces, I just to reiterate that. Every decision's gonna be hard.
You know, for classes, you have electives. What's the non-elect, is that what the other classes are called, non-electives?
Your cores.
Cores?
Yep. So your cores at the high school are reading, math, science, and social studies. Everything else above that are electives. So your voc ed, your business, Brian, help me out, ag, those are our 3 electives that we have at the high school.
Ag, business, and what was the third one?
Shop.
Shop.
Shop, yeah.
Brian, do you see any reason why the scenario 3 and scenario 4 could not work as listed? Or do you know of any reason why they couldn't work?
It's gonna impact kids both ways. It's gonna be so hard. Eliminating a 1.0 choir district-wide is gonna be very hard. Cutting a 1.0 facts will be hard for kids choosing electives because they might not be into the ag classes, the shop classes, business classes. We do have kids that don't have much interest there. Where do you put those kids?
Okay.
That's the high school side of it, not the elementary,
No,
remember, please.
yep, that's why I was asking.
Anybody have any particular favorite?
No, I think they're all terrible.
Combination classes, so it was said that if we choose that 5 at elementary, that really changes things over there. Is it feasible in your staff and be able to pull off 2 combination classes?
Not sure, classes, grades,
Grade, well, yeah, 3, 4.
3, 4, and 5, 6.
Right.
I don't wanna speak for Dr. Ed, but my understanding is that if we have and are able to provide the front end time, he believes that we have staff that will manage. If we choose to go that route, we don't necessarily have to go that route. You would just have larger class sizes, but you would still, and I don't wanna pop it up on the screen, but you're just looking at class, you're still under 30 if you would choose not to run a combo class.
And those would be an upper level,
Yeah,
not the K through 2.
right. It's just because our class size varies so much. We have class sizes that are at 58, we have class sizes that are at 72, and that causes the variance.
Brittany, what are you more comfortable with?
Original scenario 2. I don't feel comfortable cutting choir or facts. I have a child who would then start a combined class grade next year. I don't feel comfortable with that at this point, being that young. There's a part of me that feels like the combined 5th and 6th is almost a good stepping stone for kind of how junior high would be in a sense. But I can see both good and bad in a combined class. I believe our staff is capable of it, regardless of what route we take.
And
it too, we're definitely gonna be working on additional things next year. Which is gonna be tough on everybody involved. But I think even with scenario one, it's possible that we still will be in the same boat again next year too. I really would like to propose that we have a group get together and start working on our alternative ideas, even just homegrown ideas within the district to see if we can put a little Band-Aid on either 1 or 2 years.
Talk fundraising or
Whatever it might be. You know, digging into the other grants and trying to help find
the foundation played a large part in that last time.
resources. Yeah, and to
I
your,
think a lot of that has to originate outside of this school board, can't be the ones.
sure,
We've always had a member kind of sit on it as an advisory person.
I'll encourage it.
Yes, I'm leaning towards scenario 2. Does this leave some leeway in case we find the legislature won't make up their minds and all of a sudden all the districts get nothing? They're at odds over other trivial stuff, so there's no guarantee they're gonna.
Remember, we built this on an assumed 2% already. So, we just talked about that 1% is 75 to 100,000. We get nothing. We are less 200,000 next year and 200,000 the following year. So if that would happen, that would significantly impact your budget to the negative, our budget to the negative.
Would that give us enough time if we had to add 1 or 2 FTEs to the cut because of the budget, because of the state?
May 21st,
Said May 30th.
You'd
is the
have to-
magic number, correct?
May 21, I think is whenever session ends, and I thought it was May 21st.
But to
Staff
notify
has
staff,
to know
May
by
30th.
June 30.
June 30th.
June 30, we have to have it completely done, so you'd have to have a couple special board meetings to make it happen. Can you make it happen? Yes.
And there has to be a hearing in there too if they're a
Correct.
ULA person, so. It would be an extremely tight timeline.
Well, because there's 15 days on the ULA hearing piece, I think. So any teacher who's tenured, when we bring the name to the board, then they have 15 days to ask for a hearing. And so you have to have that window, that timeframe window in there.
And I'm gonna be a little more selfish on it, if you select scenario 2 and you get more money from the state, I would recommend you bank it to help offset what you're gonna have to do the following year. Rather than hire additional staff and put yourself deeper in the hole.
Still leaning first 2? Greg?
Still leaning towards not understanding quite the urgency on the decision. And I'm not, it's because and I'm not suggesting that to make decisions, the board's taking it lightly in any capacity. It's just my personal board member's opinion. I don't see the practical drawbacks outweighing the digestion of the information we received tonight until next board meeting. I know I moved for that action and it failed, but I don't, that's why I mean, scenario 1, scenario 2, it depends on what our goals are. The less we cut, the more options available to our students, the more we go into further deficit. So, to have our school not have just the choir options that we're talking about, the facts, any of that stuff, it's painful. but I really, I don't mean to kinda keep reiterating my position though, but what, is that the only reason we'd be making a decision tonight, just as a courtesy to give some more specific, information to those that are affected by it so that they can plan accordingly? Is that the
I don't see any, I don't see any information coming in the next 12 days. It's gonna significantly impact us.
No, I know. But I'm just talking the board as a, I mean, this is the first time we as a board had discussed this. These particular,
As a six-person board,
what's that?
As a six-person board, yeah, I know Brenda, John, and I have, we got to
Right.
look at the preliminary. Finance committee.
And I'm not saying that the administration goes back to the drawing board in any capacity. But we have a board meeting in 12 days. Just, that's a pretty short time frame. And I don't think it ever hurts to digest information for 12 days. So I didn't mean to have a long-winded answer or response to you, John, but
I'll be a selfish board member and I will just say, I don't wanna have this feeling again in 12 days.
I know I don't want to have it though again in 1 year.
I don't either.
But remember, there's the possibility you will regardless.
That's possible, I know.
But you
But I
might
like
also
to- I
feel
like-
really good in 12 days.
I think it's important to minimize the risk. And I get that we can't predict the future and what's gonna happen.
So, John, you had said something about, you know, if push comes to shove in May, and we had to get tighter on the belt, I mean, is that, we have to make a new resolution at that time?
You wouldn't change what you've already approved and done, but you'd have to add an additional resolution with additional staff on it.
So the majority of, we pretty much know scenario 2 is gonna happen. That's
That's
just
for you to decide.
at this point. If in May, things look gloomier, at that point, maybe we have a lot of work to do.
It's gonna get tight, I'll just be honest, it'll be very tight, because you will be dealing with tenured staff, I believe. And then you have that time frame that you have to be able to provide that hearing, so that's the only piece. Ultimately, it's your decision, and whatever your decision is, we'll support and move forward.
Brenda, your thoughts?
I'm leaning towards scenario 2, primarily just because of the population of Pelican. I don't feel comfortable dropping down another teacher. I mean, we have a challenging district, plain and simple. Everybody's important, but I don't feel comfortable dropping that extra teacher at this point, and I also don't feel comfortable completely eliminating a couple, like FAFSA and choir. I think we need to keep them part-time, even if we have to get creative in how we offer them, you know, combine, I don't know, something.
Like keeping your foot in the door?
Yeah, and my big thing is I look around us and the other schools that we have lost kids to, and if we eliminate more things and continue to make our classes bigger, they're gonna continue to go. And we need to keep what we have and, you know, work our way back up, and I have a big thing about the booster club. I think we need to start a booster club. I go to all these other schools and I'll take lead, I don't know if I can, but I need people on board, but I see that as bringing in a lot of money that can help supplement the athletics, which, you know, not only athletics, but all the arts. I don't know how we disperse the money or whatever, we can deal with that when we have 100,000 sitting in there, but I mean, you go to all these other schools and, I mean, advertising is a big deal. And to have your business name on the back of a program at all the sports events, things like that, that goes a long way. And I think that's that could be a very good supplemental money for the school.
Again, probably wouldn't be board driven, but we would have to figure out how we would handle that if it
Yeah.
did spring up on its own.
I've always thought about it, I never know when I should bring it up, or can I bring it up at a board meeting, or where it starts, but it's gotta have an idea for somebody.
So there's some legal things to that too.
I think it has to be held outside the school, the monies or whatever, don't they?
Well,
Some
there,
changes made to that now too, isn't there?
I'm gonna defer to our finance experts, cause we're walking
Say
in,
something changed with that.
we're walking in interesting waters, and I'm sure Mr. Nelson has probably some comments on that whole piece too, so, turn it to you guys, just.
So, GASB 84 is coming out in July 1st, which is going to change the structure of how student activity accounts are run and operated. Today we have two funds. One is student activity accounts that is fundraised by students and for students, and they need an administrator, and they operate under the regulations of MAPA. That is where they need an advisor. Then we have the student activity account fund 24, which is kind of a subsidiary account, fund where we have a lot of sports-driven fundraiser activities. Once the new GASB 84 comes out, Mark and I have been kind of strategizing on what to do, but a lot of those unfortunately will not meet the threshold to be under board support. So at that point in time, you guys could then start your booster club.
And take the money outside of the district, have their own checking account managed by their own people, et cetera. Can't be under the umbrella of the school district.
That could be a conversation for later.
There is something in the works for that right now. And we're working with West Central Initiative, and we have a side account set up with them with the, or, with Jessica's.
Yes, so,
Anyway.
just real quick, what we're doing right now is we have a committee that's put together that's working on raising funds for the Fine Arts Auditorium. But we're also now gonna start, we're looking at next fall doing, they're gonna call it, but it's gonna be a fundraiser where they're gonna have items to be auctioned off to raise funds to help teachers and activities cover, purchase things. And Just Bay right now is in charge of that, so if you're interested in being part of that, that'd be great. We're also gonna include, during that auction, it's gonna be a meal, and it's gonna be a Hall of Fame banquet too. And we're gonna induct people to the Hall of Fame, and then we're going to look at inviting past teachers, former teachers to come back, and then recognize them at that banquet too. So, we're gonna do that homecoming week.
Okay. More discussion, should we need a motion for the resolution?
And we do the roll call.
Entertain a motion. If we feel we can make one.
I would make a motion of adopting scenario number 2.
Motion by Mike, scenario number 2 as listed in the materials. Do we have a second?
I second.
A second by Brenda. Need to have discussion on this? Do we have any more discussion on the motion made to adopt number 2? No further discussion, this is a roll call vote for resolution. You want me to read the entire narrative? Whereas the school board of Independent School District number 548 adopted a resolution on January 7th, 2019, directing the administration to make recommendation for reductions in programs and positions, and whereas said recommendations have been received and considered by the school board. Be it resolved by the school board of Independent School District number 548 as follows: the following programs and positions, or positions thereof, be discontinued. Do we Should I just say scenario 2, or should I read them? Okay. K through 12 positions.
Leave that blank.
Maybe, okay. A elementary classroom size, 4 FTEs, fax, 0.5 FTE, choir, 0.5 choir, 0.5 Spanish, 0.61 Phi Ed, 1.0 assistant boys basketball, 1.0 junior high track, 2.0 all music, all school musical, and then 1.0 assistant extra vocal group. Sports staff, 2.7 elementary support positions, 4.2 secondary support positions, 1.0 tech position, 0.56 custodial, and 0.25 athletic activities director secretary. And now how you resolve, Brittany? It's a roll call, so.
Yes.
Yes. Ann?
Yes.
Yes. Mike?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
Resolution carries. Anything else? Nothing further, shall we adjourn? Meeting adjourned.